Before, after, before, after.
They turned out to be completely unreliable assholes.
Hello, Tim.
Hello, Ryan.
And hello, listeners. That means you listening. Welcome to episode 130 of Dismembering Horror. Let me say that again. Dismembering Horror. The podcast show where myself, Ryan McDuffie, and
Myself, Tim Aslin.
that's right, we dismember a horror film. Every week we talk about what worked for us, what did not work for us, and anything else that is Tim and myself, and a guest when we have him, found interesting or noteworthy about a horror film. Isn't that right, Tim?
Man, it's so right.
Great. We want to see the things we haven't seen. We want to revisit the things we haven't visited for a while. We love to take your recommendations for what to watch. And this is all under the spirit of, hey, we watch a movie together. We want to talk about it. It's especially fun with horror movies, you know? We want to have it be a safe space to judge freely, I guess. In the spirit as you would do with your friends, uncensored, not being held accountable to
little bit
to be recorded. Yeah. On public for all time, as Tim and I are doing with ourselves here.
Maybe some baseline moral accountability.
Yeah, of course, there's always that. But as far as what I will always beat myself over as many times as we talk ourselves down from this hill, it's for being someone who so accentuate the positive. We have a whole section that's what did not work. And human beings made these films.
Yeah.
So that's where I start out with my disclaimer, and not disclaimer, but trying to get at what the spirit of this is.
Yeah, I always think, I've said this before, I'm sure, but filmmaking's hard. And you could have all the best ideas and all the best intended ways of executing that stuff.
Or how about all the money in the world? It seems like.
Yeah. And it can still just not work out. So it's there is always that level of understanding that whatever criticism we levy, I think, at a thing or a film, there's is that the right way of putting it? That we levy?
That works, yeah.
Okay, sweet. Felt so smart when I said it. For all those things, it's there's always that understanding that sometimes you're just screwed and you have to make do with the circumstances, and whatever came out of it is your best attempt at salvaging a bad situation. Because that happens a lot in film.
Yes, but I would say the mark of a good filmmaker is making do under all and any constraints, unexpected or otherwise.
Yeah. You know what it reminds me of a little bit, and is when in the acting world, actually this is true in performance kind of across the board in my experience. So even if you're a musical performance, or a musician, or in a musical, whatever, there's this rule: you never let the audience know that you screwed up. And a lot of people do that thing where they're they miss a note and then they kind of look at the audience I'm acknowledging that I screwed up to make it seem less weird that I screwed up. And man, we try often, people who are, I don't know, helping other people work on their craft, to be never let the audience know.
The
Never
worst.
let them know.
It doesn't matter if they know. It's just like no one cares. Just keep going.
Exactly. And I think that really does apply to filmmaking. It's like sometimes the better result is the result where you're like, yeah, totally. That was my intention. You know what I mean? Like it almost, or if you're just really good at weaving in the mistake to the bigger picture.
I
like,
mean,
make it work.
For to keep the acting example going, aren't those just some of the best moments when a little bit of improv happens to something spontaneous captured?
I was just watching that clip from I guess it would be the Two Towers special features, the Lord of the Rings Two Towers special features. And it's Peter Jackson talking about the scene where Aragorn kicks the helmet in frustration because they think that Pippin and Merry are dead. And he had to kick the helmet repeatedly. They're like, 4 or 5 takes or whatever. And it's a pain in the ass to keep kicking this helmet. But, they're trying to get the shot so the helmet kind of lands near camera. And it's a long shot. And Viggo Mortensen, he's being a trooper as usual. And he's done it 3 or 4 times. And they think they have it, but Peter Jackson is kind of like, yeah, I think we should do one more. Can we do one more? And Viggo's like, yeah, of course. And they do it this final take, and he kicks it, and he like lets out this scream that was not scripted at all. He falls to his knees. He has this really like dramatic moment. And the kick is a really good kick. Like the helmet goes kind of where it should. And they're like, wow, that was unexpected and awesome and whatever. And like later in the day, I think probably one of the producers comes by and he's like to Peter Jackson, he's like, hey, just want to let you know Viggo broke his foot on that last take, and so he's gonna need a little time. But Viggo did it and didn't, like you might expect an actor to, or anybody, they hurt themselves in a moment to be like, okay, hang on, stop, I just hurt myself, like we have to pause. And Viggo, being the kind of badass professional that he is, used the pain in reality to, affect his performance and stayed in the performance knowing that that's going to actually benefit the film. And they ended up using that take. That's the take in the film of
Or
him.
how about better than not even because it was going to be used is because cut hasn't been called yet. Don't break
That's
the
right.
reality
That's right.
actors.
Yeah,
and one
exactly.
Of my
He's in
favorite
it.
one of my favorite examples of that is there's a bunch is Leo DiCaprio in Django Unchained. He's literally
that's a good one,
bleeding
too. Yeah.
on film and keeps going. Oh man. Well, Tim, to wrap this up aside, because we have a whole movie to get to, I'll fall back on what our guest Carly said, which was criticism is a gift of attention. And then also, I think what you said to me on our Insidious The Last Key episode, which was like episode 3, I believe, of ours, which was people are allowed not to like things, and that includes media.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, and to give credit to those filmmakers, despite, we're working against the forces against us, the filmmaker behind today's film, the Taiwanese film Mon 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 Monsters from 2017, was written and directed by the one and the same Giddens Co. Boom. And
That's your catchphrase now? Boom.
just to say, hey, there, that's it. I'm used to saying more than one name for it.
Yeah.
I'll say boom or bam when it's a sole writer director. How about that?
I love it.
Great. So Tim, we will get into Mon 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 Monsters as we do. We gotta
It's
watch
3
a trailer,
Mons, right?
Yes.
Mon Monsters.
No. 3 Mons that are separate from monsters.
Isn't that what I just did?
I don't know.
Mon Monsters.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you ready for the trailer for Mon 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 Monsters?
Man, I couldn't be more ready.
All right, let's do it. Here we go. from 2017 for Mon 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 Monsters.
林书伟，校园生活除了念书之外，还有人际关系呀。
你干嘛打我？哪里好玩啊？老师。我觉得那个保险箱一定有金条。
It's interesting. I noticed some subtitle differences there in that. So it does change things. I love the line in the movie when he says, "Why are you always picking on me?" And he says, "For fun." And in this one, the response was pure pleasure.
For fun is better.
Yeah. Great. Okay, Tim. For Mon 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 Monsters, after the trailer, we rate it. So would you tell yourself to, per our rating system, if you were talking to yourself, would you tell yourself to avoid Mon 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 Monsters, stream it, rent it, or buy it?
I'd stream it.
Bam!
It has just, yeah. It has just enough things that kind of either like irked me or that I just was like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like it doesn't appeal to me, I guess, or from a logic point of view. Just enough of those, even though it's got some really cool stuff in it. But yeah, it's a stream.
Great. This is one of those, as happens every so often, where I just feel like it's a perfect stream movie. You know what I mean? I don't have a whole lot that didn't work for me, but and so I guess I just say that to set up, even though I have a huge list of like what worked for me, why wasn't it higher? But I guess we'll get into all of that. Anyways, yeah,
Let's
perfect.
hope.
Yeah, perfect stream it movie. It was did just enough to exceed low expectations and make it interesting and not like just one of those total just bummer movies where you're just like, ugh, I guess stream it or whatever. But no regrets watching it. There you go.
Cool.
Double stream. Double solid stream.
Wow. That sounds horrific.
But it's not, because it's solid.
Hey.
What? That wasn't a what? You said that like I was making a joke or a pun.
Hey.
Anyways, let's get out of here and go to over there to our summary.
Oh, God. Okay. Taiwanese high school. Gotta be honest. I don't think high school kids anywhere in the world act like this. But I could be wrong. I've never been to Taiwan. But it's a little over the top. They're real mean to each other.
Yeah.
Like, really mean.
Everyone is, too. It's a whole school filled of mean people.
Brutal. So there's a bunch of mean, like, every kid is mean. And you have your sort of target of the meanness to start off. What's his name? Damn it.
Lin.
Oh, yeah, Lin. Wait, really? Yeah.
Lin
right. Yeah, I kept getting confused as to the him and the main bully. Anyway, so okay, you got Lin. And his class is going after him. They think he stole some money, I guess class money, whatever. And his teacher is totally like on the side of the mean classmates, which is so annoying. And in spite of all of that, he sort of, would you say, accidentally befriends the bullies? He's kind of forced to in a weird way. Like
he's forced to be with the bullies, but
and then they like kind of take him in a weird way.
Yeah.
Uncomfortable way. And through that, they have to do some community service, and they are...
I'd say it's the other way around. Through community service with each other, they become friends.
Sure, yeah. So on their little community service jaunt, they are they're supposed to be feeding destitute people in a I don't know, it's mostly older people in sort of, it's not a home, but it's sort of a, I don't know, an apartment complex where some older people who need to be fed are. And there are 2 young girls who are monsters of some sort, unclear, kind of vampire-y, almost zombie-ish, but not quite, but definitely they feed on humans. And our, whatever that is, four boys are causing trouble in there, and like they decide to break back in to steal a chest that they found in one of the rooms and blah, blah, blah. And then they run into the 2 monsters, and one of the monsters in the ensuing fracas gets actually hit by a car, and then by
another horrible person who just drives away.
Yeah. You hit a little girl in the middle of the street and then go, yeah, I'm gonna go.
No, he goes, I'm getting out of here.
Yeah. I just imagine him being real casual about it, like, oh, ugh, like it's a nuisance to him. He's like, oh God, another homeless little girl fell in the path of my car. I better just turn around and leave. So here's the story. The boys realize that they need to take in the injured monster because they don't want to get wrapped up with the cops, and the cameras saw them like hit her over the head with a shovel and blah, blah, blah. Right. And so they do that. And then, so here's the story. The story is they've kidnapped and chained up a monster in the like basement of the high school. And they proceed to basically torture the monster, which is really messed up and rude. And Lynn, our I guess lead character, he's the only one who sees, sort of, he like sympathizes. He tries to figure out where she maybe came from, like how she became a monster. And we get all that information. And then the sister of the monster, the other monster, they realize that sister monster is going to come looking for her. So they set up a whole mousetrap plan to kill both of the monsters. And it goes exceedingly well. Actually, no, it just completely backfires and everybody dies. The end.
Great. All right. Let's move on then for our next section here. You ready?
God, yes. Ryan, I mean, I was born ready.
Are you ready? Yes, I think I heard a yes from our audience. All right, here we go. What worked?
What worked? What worked for you? What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm, Smith.
What worked? What worked for you?
Well, this is always a biggest what worked for me in any movie when it does this is going somewhere where I don't expect it. And as tricky as it was in times, as far as the unexpectedness of having a story with just reprehensible people and no one to relate to.
Oh, man.
Because, like, even our quote-unquote hero or lead, Lynn, quickly just becomes another. Even though the bullies still bully him, he just becomes caught up in their bulliness and is abusing the elderly at the beginning, and then goes on to... You know, we're open with spoilers here at the way end, killing the student body, along with himself.
Weird. It's weird, right? Like everybody is super problematic at the very least. Like every character is so flawed and like awful.
Well, like, yeah, because even you have, it was just horrible and heart-wrenching, the scene where the teacher burns alive from, when she gets infected. But, well, because the bullies infect her, first of all. They poison her. They kill her, essentially. And then she's burning up from the sunlight, as the ghouls do, in front of the student body at a basketball game everyone's at. And just everyone's, like, laughing and giggling and taking out their phones. I think maybe our main guy is yelling, help her, help her.
It's not
Someone
him
is.
yelling. It's like a teacher who's yelling it. It's somebody we don't even know. It's so fucked up.
It's so messed. Yeah. And even then, though, that teacher is like, is pretty reprehensible in her own way.
She's awful.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting setup to have everybody suck.
And so you can see how that I'll put under the guise of that is unexpected. Like when it starts and you have those first classroom scenes where Lynn's being framed, and like in the over-the-top way this movie is, the whole class is just like abusing him and laughing at him, and the teacher's just kind of letting it happen. So you think, oh, okay, this is a story, just one of those stories about the picked on underdog guy, a la Babysitter or whatever, who's, coming into himself and enacting revenge. And these are the bullies who are going to set up to die in horrific ways later. But no, it's about a main character becoming one of these horrible bullies.
Right.
And nothing as far as like being singled out really happens to the bullies. Yes and no, but
it sort of strikes me that, I mean, this is maybe jumping to a really broad thing, but just this whole movie, I think, could be taken as sort of just an allegory for abuse. And because everybody in the movie is abused or abusive, and everybody has the sort of construct of they are the result, or their actions are the result of the abuse that they've that has been inflicted upon them.
I mean, this is probably our most we've talked about this a bunch of times as far as the most prevalent themes and things we've covered, from Psycho to a bunch of other stuff we've covered. It's the cycle of abuse.
Because, like, if you just take all of your characters really quick, right? Okay, so Lynn, he's the subject of abuse from all of the students around him and his teacher. Like, basically everybody is like, you don't have a voice here, you suck. The main bully, we learn, had a super abusive dad and probably mom, and a super problematic, like, upbringing. The other students, it's sort of vaguely just, it seems like they all are just not, they're abused in the sort of neglectful way. Like, nobody really listens to them. They're left to their own devices. There's no boundaries, no structure, no actual discipline, no caring for them. They're dogs off of a leash, right? Like, they're just sort of whatever.
Well, I'd say, too, in a greater sense, kind of like, what was the Korean movie we watched where there was kind of a similar location of, like, destitute apartment housing?
Oh, God, yes. It wasn't Hide and Seek, was it?
No, it was a different one. Or wait, no, it was that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was that one, I think. But just by the mere presence of destitution, that just fits into that theme of a world built on abuse of others.
Yeah. And then, like, the teacher, she's sort of an interesting version of abuse because she seems to be self-abusing with her dogmatic view of religion, and that ignores, by being so dogmatic about it, she ignores compassion for anybody else. And the homeless people, or not homeless people, the elderly people, they're badly abused by their sort of the society's neglect of them. And then specifically, which I thought was really interesting, is you open and kind of close the movie, not exactly, but pretty close, with a handicapped young man, I would say. It's hard to say if he's high school age or maybe just a little bit older, who is being left by himself to tend like a store, like a convenience store. And he's being totally, like, he's incapacitated mentally, and he's being abused by, I guess, his caretaker or mom or whoever it is, the person who runs the store. And like, I think all of these things are connected.
And then even she, sorry, just to further your point, she is like sick somehow, we get.
That's right. Yes,
she's
exactly.
deeply sick. She's physically sick in her own way. So
there really is this undercurrent theme going on that I think is pretty interesting, and it's just enough, I would say, to support the fact that we don't have anybody who is like a good person.
Well, and it's kind of funny because, I mean, to play into that theme in a fun, unpredictable way too, we sympathize most with the literal monsters. It's one of those stories because they're the ones who we see getting the physical abuse kind of the worst. And
oh my God, yeah.
And then we learn their origins, they're actual people, so that doesn't hurt.
I think that I like this a lot. I like that the metaphor essentially is when you neglect people and you just sort of, it's like, it's victim blaming in a way, right? Like, these two little girls were the victims of it's a weird, convoluted explanation as to how they became monsters. But nonetheless, society basically shunned them for becoming monsters.
It was that
something. It's a voodoo thing. And
their parents abused them or left them out to dry somehow.
Right.
So the sisters did some ritual that they thought was going to save them, but ended up turning them into ghouls.
There you go. And so society said, peace out, screw you, you're just a monster now. And then that just cycle or that way of looking at the world just it's imbued in everything throughout the movie. And you get some really cool moments, which I was happy about because, man, the main bully is the worst. Like, he's just awful. And there are scenes where I was just like, dude, I don't want to see you like be awful anymore. I'm over it.
Yeah.
But we get these moments where you see him actually have feelings. Like, it's that kind of old trope of, the hard exterior shell cracks a little bit when something he cares about gets taken away. His girlfriend or the girl he likes dies at the hand of the monster. And, so there is some really, really well constructed story elements and like thematic elements throughout. I think there's a cultural gap, but by and large, I was pretty psyched about the construct.
The only cultural gap I got was like, man, they really like their fart jokes in a way. Like,
yeah, I think the fart jokes and the extreme nature of some of the like reactions to things, I was like, is this
right? Like,
is
when
this realistic depiction of that world?
He holds like up when they all hold up like when the monster's first in the room, and like one of them's holding up a trumpet and one of them's holding up a pom-pom, and you're just kind of like,
yes, exactly.
The filmmakers just think this is the greatest thing, and I'm just kind of like,
that's right. Yeah.
It's not that I don't like silly things, but it did seem like a specifically non-American sense of humor.
Exactly. Yes. So yeah, but man, it's got some good foundational groundwork was laid for this story.
Well, another foundational thing I liked for this story was you have the what kind of horror monster movie is this? And there is kind of a subgenre, which I say this falls into. It's doing two subgenres in a way,
yeah,
and this is still coming off of where as I was saying, the other thing we just talked about, and this were like the unexpected directions that really worked for me, where you see the poster and hear about it, and you think, okay, it's just some like monster loose in a school,
right.
School kids versus them kind of thing, and I'm like, great, I'm on board for that. But then what we get sort of as setup is it does end up doing that. So I get that it's scratched and I love it. And it's so much fun. And those are some of the best scenes of just when the monster is actually loose and fighting them. It's great. But then we also get this like kind of like what the movie is it called The Woman, and there's also one where it's like where they find like the kids find like the zombie girl and start raping it, and like just that's a whole thing of like captured monster was once a human. Anyway, that's where what I wasn't expecting from this, and it was cool that it did that too, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. And I thought it was cool how it did the best of both worlds of those kind of monster horror stories, the trapped monster and the monster on the loose.
Right. Yeah, I think it bridges those two things pretty effectively for the most part. I was.
Is this a what worked?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to remember, what was that movie we watched? What the hell was it called? It was also an Asian high school. Damn, I'm looking now to see if it pops out.
Bedeviled?
Death Bell.
Oh, Death Bell, yeah.
I can't even. Death Bell is so forgettable to me. I mean, God, we both said avoid on it. I don't even remember who the bad guy or what the threat in Death Bell was.
It was someone like, it was kind of like a Saw-like thing.
That's right. There was sort of a murderer.
Yeah, and it was like someone who worked for the school or whatever, or was a parent of one of the students.
That's right, and there's a ghost and sort of a ghost. Yeah. Okay, anyway, so that's right. This made me think of that, the vibe of that, but this actually has I think a better story. But it has a similar tone to it. What was I getting at? There's sort of, it feels a little bit like two movies to me, and I think I prefer the second movie, which is I don't think I do. I know I do, which is what you're talking about. The monster loose in the school movie that is in this, I really, really like. I love how are we going to catch the monster, like, mousetrap plan that is going to go awry. Like, I love that stuff. Was it how they executed it, was it as successful as I thought it could be? Maybe not, but that's a later conversation. But that stuff, I mean, it's like it's not quite the whole second half of the movie, but it's certainly the last third of the movie, and probably more. But I love that stuff. I love a plan. I love a schematic where you show the plan in
they had a
childlike drawings. I love that stuff. I love that it's like they've got a little. You're here and you got to signal to this and you got to run and get the door closed and you got to like crank the thing and you got to, light the thing on fire and drop it down a shaft. Like, I love all of that stuff. It's so fun.
Yeah, and just while I'm on, the thought trains on relating to Alien 3,
yes!
which is a great example of that. Just real quick, the POV shots of the ghoul going on the walls and the ceilings were really well done and effective and fun.
Totally.
Just like, out of Alien 3.
All of the monster movements are super cool.
Yeah, I was going to say, just effects-wise, there's when it's sort of when they first get it into the school basement where they keep there's some of that like twitchy movement stuff, but not in like the total J horror way, but just in this like where there's I don't know, it looked cool how they did it. Like when she's climbing on the walls and stuff, it wasn't like a forced obvious jerkiness, but there was just something about how it moved where in one hand you're going, this is clearly an effect, but the other time it totally it gets at that unnerving, this could be real quality.
I think if I had to guess how they did a lot of that, it felt to me like it's a lot of wire work. Like a lot of, as opposed to doing a sort of a CG, body double type thing.
But just something about the frame rate, or I don't know how they did it.
I agree. There's this almost shutter speed thing going on that's cool.
Yeah.
It's very unnerving. You're right.
And then just because this last small thing effects wise, although I wasn't crazy about the flames, how those looked weren't great. When they were actually like the skin burning and you saw the sort of translucidness or whatever you call it, where you could kind of see under their skin when it's starting to glow and you see their veins. All that was really well done.
I agree, and I think just the actual monster makeup itself is really good. Like, there's some amazing texture in because I kind of took away that, you know, they're semi-vampire-ish, right? They burn up if they're in the sunlight, but they don't just die immediately, and they have their skin as they get longer away from having fed. I don't know if that was a conceit, but one way or the other, their skin has this sort of burnt, crispy, you know, flaky texture to it. Sometimes it's like almost tar-ish, like dried tar. It looks so good. I mean, just the detail in it, and like it's grimy and it's borderline just, you know, unfortunately, what happens if you're out in the elements for too long, right? Like if, you know, like you've seen homeless people who it's just layer upon layer of dirt on their skin, and it creates this very unpleasant effect visually.
And was
I'm sure physically too for them, but
it was a good visualization too, or representation of what they set up. This is not a zombie. This is not a ghost. This is not a vampire. It's an undead ghoul in a way that they captured that, like whatever that means to you. They did that well, you know, of making it so it wasn't these other things, but this kind of other specific thing. It was cool.
Yeah, and I think it wraps kind of back around to I feel like there's sort of a socioeconomic term for this, but I don't know, like the unseen people, or the people we don't want to see. I feel like there's a term that is around now for this, but you know, culturally, lots of our different cultures, but like contemporary cultures, I think, have this ongoing problem of trying to turn a blind eye to destitute people. And this has that feel to it, right? Like, as the Lynn character feeds and kind of takes care of the younger monster, she starts to look healthier. She starts to look more like a human. And, you know, the overall sort of message being, it's like kind of all these two people need. They're not monsters, for starters. They're the products of, like, their monstrousness is the product of something bigger. But they themselves just need a little, like, care and compassion, and they could turn back into, you know, healthy human beings. Like,
that's never set up that they could turn back to humans.
No, I'm not saying that it's set up. I'm saying that it's sort of it's an implicit sort of, if you took it to the furthest end, there's sort of an implicit thematic aspect of that.
Shown that they have as much. It's shown that they have as much sympathy. They're capable of sympathy in a way that is sort of our marker for if someone's human or not. That the way that the ghoul sisters care for each other. They deeply care. That's set up from the beginning. I loved when they're like, when they like tuck each other into their boxes they're sleeping in. And
that's right. And that's so smart, because it helps us later when they're being tortured sympathize with them. I mean, what also helps is having her just horrible, like horrific to listen to this little girl cry and be in pain all the time. I mean, it's like just the utter like horribleness of these kids to continue on when, who cares if it's a monster? I mean, it's literally crying and whimpering and like screaming all the time because you're doing awful things. Like, you have no ability to recognize, are you that big of a psychopath that you're just like taking joy in that pain infliction?
I mean, that's easy to buy into as far as what we do to not just each other, but let alone animals.
That's sort of my point, is that really is I think that's kind of the strongest horror moments in this whole movie. Like, it made me sick to my stomach because I was just like, it's just too much.
Like,
and I don't mean in a bad way. I'm saying in an effective way.
Like in the way when because they go from torturing her in a way there, it's like, yeah, look at this. We can use sunlight to torture her, to just kind of like, oh, I'm just casually torturing her.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of bored with this now.
It's awful.
Yeah.
It really is pointing at the most dark elements of what humans have to offer. Like left unchecked, we are just horrible beings.
Well, and all we have to check ourselves is ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah, man.
Which actually that could bring us to something both big and small, something that really affects whether a movie like this works or not, but is just so simple to address. Is I forget when you mentioned, but you mentioned it before, where it's like you just have to have them, if they're doing something horrible or like whatever it is they're doing, it's so helpful to hear them mention or consider the alternative at least. So what I mean by that is like the importance of when they're abusing the elderly at the beginning, and one of them goes in so many words says, "Should we be doing this? Is this okay?" And then, yeah, of course, whatever. But just that little moment just makes us able to buy in to the whole movie then. And there's some movies we've watched where you said, Tim, it's like all they had to do was just have a moment like that and I would have been in.
Yeah, I mean, it's the conscience of the movie. Like the characters need to have it, but the movie does too. Like
yeah, exactly. Like the movie has to be aware that we are viewing this as people, so we have to acknowledge it somehow.
Because otherwise, your suggestion as the filmmaker is that not only are the characters in your movie just reprehensible and psychopaths, but so are you, the filmmaker, and so is the audience, and that's
in a
never
way where
the
you
case. Maybe it is, but
just
the
don't
audience
even
isn't.
Where you don't even care or consider those sorts of things. Yeah.
Right. Like, like the girl next door sort of suffered from this, where it's like, I don't think they're in touch at all with what their audience like thinks.
On many levels.
Yeah. I was scared. I will say, when they got the monster down there, and it became clear that this was going to sort of be a captive, torture-y sort of movie, I became very nervous that we were just going to go into girl next door territory again. I was like, oh no.
There's another example of what I was trying to think of in that subgenre. Just made me think of it, mentioning, when they question abusing the elderly. I thought that was one of the good, fun, stylistic scenes where it was like, it's horrible watching what they're doing to these people, but like they make a fun, stylized scene out of it where it's like a filmic extension of their horrible impulses, where there's like, it's a fun montage where they're like
pushing them around in chairs, and
they're spinning them in chairs. They're like holding the spoons of food up to their mouths and taking them away. They're like holding them up, two of them, or like,
they're doing like a chicken fight. Isn't that what it's called? A chicken fight, when you have somebody on your shoulders?
Yeah, that's what the Wikipedia called it. We're just doing the horrible thing, but it's all done in the style where it's like we're filmically plugging into their revelry. So it's like, oh God, they're horrible and I hate this, but yet they're still making a fun scene out of it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a funny trick, actually, in a way. It's almost the filmmakers testing the audience.
Yeah.
It's like, where's the line of you? Are you going to catch yourself enjoying this?
Yeah.
Like, I think it's an interesting thing to do. Like in any realm, to test the audience, to be like, I'm going to say something really reprehensible. Are you going to laugh at that joke?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, are you? Is it okay to laugh? Like, it's smart to force the audience to kind of check in with themselves and be like, wait a minute, should I like this or shouldn't I like that? That's smart. That's almost exact. It's an extension of exactly what you're saying. It's the filmmakers having a conscience, the movie having a conscience, and forcing the audience to look at their conscience in that moment. That's smart, because that helps us as we carry on to stay in touch with that just enough to be like, man, this is messed up. And that's where you want your audience to be in that headspace of like, this is messed up. That's why it's a horror film.
Yeah. Just another scene that comes to mind that I liked was the ending, how that played out, where at first I was still kind of, it was like it was hard to get on board with the main character and how he ended up being a horrible person too. Like at first I didn't really like how he doesn't let in, what's the name of the main bully? Tuan Renhao. Right. The main bully. When Lin refuses to let him in and says, "No, I'd rather have you die by the hands of the ghoul," because when they're fighting them at the end, I'm like, I don't know if I'm buying him doing that. But then when it got to the ending, that did end up working once we got to the ending, because it worked as a transition point to setting up how Lin, our main guy, could poison voodoo eyes, the entire student body by putting the ghoul blood in the soup. And it was also fun how he drank it himself. Yeah. So he's just sort of like, it's not just directed at other people. It's sort of just the like, I hate the world kind of angle. And then it was just satisfying, the fun way too of like, the idea of the entire student body is going up in flames right now. Right. It's just like it was going out on both a high note and a big note.
Yeah, I mean, look, this movie is pretty explicitly saying who's the actual monster, and then they do it in a more zoomed in way by showing us this character who we're supposed to kind of think is the compassionate, like, touchstone. He's us, right? Theoretically. And the filmmakers are like, no, he's not. Like, he's a monster too. Actually, he's the monster of the movie. He doesn't have the fortitude to stand up to the other monsters, not the kidnapped monster, but the other kids. He doesn't have the fortitude to stand up to them and rebuke their horribleness. He just becomes them. And then it's fun. I think it's smart to have him take it himself, because it's like, again, he ends up having a conscience too, but he accepts that he's a monster as well.
Yeah.
And that's pretty deep stuff, and it's smart.
Yeah, it was just a nice touch when he's walking away that he catches on fire too. It's like we've talked about, like the ending of Bone Tomahawk, where it's like they give you that little something to chew on that just has some thematic meaning built into the character decisions.
I think we'd be pissed if he just walked away.
Exactly.
I think we would. I think we'd be like, well, then what was that all for anyway?
It's like we can be pissed that he's killing everyone, but then it's just, I don't know, like any great ending, I think, kind of, walks a middle ground and a lot, of depending on the movie, what it is. But
yeah, but there's a satisfaction in it. It feels appropriate and almost it's cathartic in a way, because it's like, God, we went through this horrible thing. Everybody's awful. Let's just burn it all to the ground.
Or where it can be eliciting conflicting emotions.
Totally,
and is cathartic in that sense. That's a way to put it. Just real quick, I liked that there was a voodoo angle to it. That was fun.
Sure.
Exactly.
It's so thin. It's like barely even there.
Well, it's not that we need,
it's cool.
But yeah, but it makes it what it is, and you just kind of go, "Oh, cool, voodoo stuff. All right, neat."
right.
And it was just having that one interneting scene where he's researching, who the disappearance of who the girls were. It just didn't need any more of that. It was perfect just like that.
I just want to push back because I'm tired of voodoo shaming. It's gotten a bad name. It's not evil. Voodoo is a beautiful, beautiful way of looking at the world.
Movie voodoo.
Oh, right. Movie voodoo. That's true.
I liked you mentioned the mother with the son at the beginning running that depressing little store filled with plastic junk. I like them, and as far as weird little side characters go, the war veteran who's has dementia and he sort of an off-screen scene we get with him where he puts on his war outfit and has his sword and he is presumably fights off one of the ghouls. Yeah. Just another just quirky, weird side character. I like how they populated the world with a few of these guys.
I agree. I think the world building in this is pretty cool, and maybe it's just because it's another part of the world that I've never been to and unfamiliar with. But the visual construction and framing of this world in particular, the palette, it's really quite beautiful, especially when you consider that it's a fairly desolate, what we're actually seeing is pretty, it's almost, what's that term? It's brutalist architecture almost, and sort of very cinder blocky, hard angles, hard colors. Everything's got a bit of crack to it, and yet it's very, very visually pleasing. The framing, I kept just being like, "Ooh, that's a nice shot. Ooh, that's a nice angle. Ooh, that's a pretty shot. Ooh, that's lit beautifully." The people making this are very good, very, very good at that stuff.
It's funny how whenever you turn on a movie, and especially if it's God, I mean, so many examples now where there's this line where if it's how it's shot is not up to a certain snuff, I'm like, this is low budget in a bad way. I'm not buying into the reality of it. And it was cool. This was fully on the other side of the line where I was
from second one.
Yeah.
I was like, ooh, okay, all right,
cool.
Here we go.
Yeah. I was fun opening the movie with those side characters I just mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. What else you got?
I thought that it was it's a tricky thing to do where you have what are some movies like this where you have a captured monster or whatever and you're kind of making light at them or with them. So it's in this, you have those scenes where they're putting paint on them and the ghoul, where they're they have basically a little rave party around her, the captured ghoul. Yeah. They put her head in a bird cage, put stuff on her mouth.
God.
It can be really tricky to have those scenes and have the ghoul and the ghoul's sister, the ghouls at large, retain that they're still a threat.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So I thought it was cool how they managed to not cross that line where they're kind of could go full into kind of goofy comedy territory.
Right.
Which is weird. They did it, but it somehow didn't cross that line. So then when, the deaths happened more in the second half, you're still like, oh man, oh yeah. You weren't, it just wasn't totally in silly territory.
It is an interesting, it's a fine line too. And, I think that there's just a sensibility that is on display here of walking that line, or balancing that line. I think the scene that sticks out that just manages to do it, that could have gone over the line and it been dumb and doesn't, manages not to, is the I Did It My Way musical sequence where the sister ghoul who's loose is really just tearing it up. She's making her way through the town, and she finally finds the school bus that a bunch of the classmates are on, including the girl that the bully likes. And that whole sequence, having the My Way song going on in that particular version of it, I was like, oh, this is going to get dorky and cheesy. And it just manages not to. In fact, I felt like it went the other direction and was quite strong.
Tim, I thought it was incredibly strong. I was kind of saving this best for last. I thought I wanted to mention
I have.
I mean, yeah, no, that scene, the bus scene, I thought was incredible on so many levels. I thought it was the sole great standout scene of the film that makes it from this film from a mere stream to a hearty stream. It's just working on so many levels, I thought. I mean, yeah, the My Way cover set the perfect tone to it. That ironic use of music, it's like it's always something I love when it works, but again, can be a fine line of if it sort of feels cheap or not. But just that from a horror gore perspective, you have like the buckets of blood and like what a good touch, because when it's like, using all the uses of the bus where it's like the blood splattering on the windows and seeing it, the bus parked in the middle of the street.
I love that shot.
When the door opens towards the end and it's just like the blood's rivering out of the bus. So just, that sense, the fact that it's like a full massacre of like the school bus full of kids. So it's just brutal in that sense, but is like satisfying in a weird way of like, putting the bull in the china shop and just letting it loose, and that it has that clear line, that physical line of going down this thin bus and the students can't get past it. It's just that sets up the location.
I mean, having the girl who ends up being the last one, the one that we know. That was
literally what I was going to say.
Quietly sitting there.
Having a main girl as the focal point, where it allows us that literal focal point of being able to see, like, from her perspective, the ghoul coming down the rows, but then also just as a little bit of trajectory to it of like the ghoul working its way down the bus to get to her. And we know it's going to see the teeth from her sister, so it's going to especially have a field day on her. She's, one of our main characters too, if you want to call her that. It's just great. And then on top of all that too, still going with what made the scene so great, I love it when you have... It's kind of like that trope we've talked about, introduced in Wrong Turn in 2003.
Yes.
Where it's like the policeman death, where you think we're before then we were sort of it's now a trope, but at a time, we're accustomed to presence of police means a certain sense of safety. So a lot of times, like being located in a city or being, is a version of that too. So I love things that bend with that rule, where it's like House That Jack Built did this in a great way too, where he can just be like flagrantly killing people and chopping off limbs or whatever. And no, people just ignore screams and walks by the police officer holding a body part, doesn't even notice or care, kind of thing. To working with that, where it's like you have a school bus parked in the middle of a street in a city, and it's like feels like it should be sacred, safe grounds, but nope, not at all. Because unless there's a whole army of police officers or whatever, sitting right by, the monster is going to have no problem killing them all off, and it doesn't.
It's so good too, that shot, top-down shot of the intersection, where people are they're just kind of going about their business, making their way around this bus that's stopped in the middle of the intersection. Nobody's getting out of their car and going, "Is everybody okay in there?" They're just like, "Ugh, this bus is in the way. Can you just go around? Go around."
Well, since this was the last my biggest thing that I was leading up to, I had the one smaller thing, and then I'm all set for what worked for me, and that is the biggest laugh of the film for me, which was it's set up, and it's just kind of, you get used to or whatever, where the other bullies are calling Lynn, they just call him Booby's lover from the beginning, and then that's his nickname throughout. And so it's just like so stupid, and you get used to it. But then it all paid off at the way end, when it's like after one of the bullies is killed by the ghoul, and like our main bully, Tuan Ren Hao, is like, it's getting to him, the death of his friend, the stakes are high, people are dying. And then still in a moment of like urgency, he calls him Booby Lover still. Like that's his name. It's like, despite all that, that's just his name at this point, said just as seriously, and that cracked me up. That was really funny.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's not horrible. That's the thing. It's just, well, I guess we should talk about what didn't work and what kept us from being a rent.
You ready for that then?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. What did not work?
It's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
What did not work?
Like, I feel like it should be a rent, and it's not.
I know why, at least for myself, Tim.
Okay, I want to hear it.
There's two things. The smaller thing that's just specific to this movie, that's like, the concrete could have been better thing. The main bully felt like the only one with just that little bit of a defined backstory of, abused by parents. So just like the other bullies are just kind of, I didn't know who was who, kind of forgettable.
Yeah.
The girl, like, she was given like, oh, she's kind of cool and has headphones or whatever. Like,
right.
Wasn't given anything beyond that. Our main guy, Lynn, he was given, he's sort of the main bullied kid, but didn't really have a sense of his home. I don't know. We needed to be given that little something for each of them would have been helpful, and didn't do that. Need no say more on that for me.
Yeah, it was a little blobby to me. And what I mean is, like, the Blob, Steve McQueen, we get who he is because of who he is. But there's this sort of weirdness in the Blob that we talked about of, like, he's not friends with these kids, and then he's suddenly friends with these kids. But what the Blob does that this almost does, but doesn't quite, is that it gives us a touchstone in what the adults think about the kids, and then specifically for our main characters, what the parents think. And this gives us we never meet any parents, for one thing. That's a problem, right? Like, I think if we had been introduced to Lynn's parents in some form, it would help us along, right? It would help define him a little bit more and give us some sort of, like, reflection as to why he is the way he is. We get it, but only through dialogue of what the main bully's parents are like, right? So, like, if we had gotten to meet the mom of the main bully and seen what the teacher describes, that would be much, much more helpful for us to understand it. And get, like, you can very easily have all of the parents of the kids have to show up, and just in a quick glance, we can get a lot from just seeing them, just define them visually.
And also just giving the other two bullies just some even little more defining characteristics at all. Yeah.
So, like, not having that, and there's a couple opportunities for it, but we just don't get it. So, yeah, I think you're right. It really hinders us from getting on board.
Yeah. Great. So you want to hear
I do.
Excuse me. My one other thing, my main thing, I think, why this prevents from being a higher thing. I was listening to our friends over on their podcast, Beyond the Screenplay, the subsidiary podcast of Lessons from the Screenplay. And Brian over there reminded me of a quote by Howard Hawks, who produced, The Thing from Another World, which we've covered, where Howard Hawks has a quote that's something like, to have a good movie, you have to have 3 great scenes and no bad scenes. And I just thought, you know what? That's the case. That's, there was some truth to that. That's fun. It's a little too cut and dry, but there's something to it at the same time. I think it's a good, fun, interesting quote.
Interesting.
Where this movie, for me, it had no bad scenes, but it only had one great scene, which was the bus scene that I was freaking out about. The abusing the elderly montage came close, and the ending kind of came close. Those were the kind of, like, good scenes or kind of like other memorable scenes.
Don't you feel like the ending really, really like missed an opportunity? I thought so much more was going to go down. Mm-hmm. And it just didn't.
Yeah, exactly. Like it could have been elevated somehow.
Yeah.
That bit more to make it a great scene of that unique situation, the
Right.
promise of the premise, the potent possibilities of an entire student body. You know, let's have seen, you know, all the possible things students and teachers could have been doing at that time, and they go up in flames, which I get goes against the vision, though, of playing it all in the long take just from behind.
Sure.
But at the same time, and maybe budgetary constraints. But anyway, it's just an idea. It's just an example of, I don't know what could have been done, but something about even those good scenes that I mentioned liking a lot, something was still holding them back from being great scenes.
Well, even the whole final not final, but the trap sequence, it doesn't quite go where I think it could have. We could have gotten more complicated with it and had it been more deeply affecting than it was. Yeah. Which I mean, to me, that was my biggest bum out moment. I was like all like hyped up to see how the plan is going to go bad. And then, because that's the most exciting part of any movie, right? Like, you set the plan up, you make it seem like it's airtight, and then you have it fall apart. And then you force your characters to try to salvage something. And that's when you get to see your characters really, really arrive, because they have to, in their worst moment, figure something out. And like, you know, it's the come to Jesus moment for the main characters, and we just don't get it. In this one, the kid just goes, I guess I'm just awful anyway.
Yeah.
And we're like,
you know, you can still make that work, though, if the scenes themselves sort of reach their full extent of possibilities.
But like, if you're going to make him become the new worst person, you got to do more than just have him open the window.
Yeah.
Like, have him really spiral. Have him turn they put gasoline in the sprinkler system, and that never comes back around and pays off. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Like, do something, or at least have, like, that's a looming threat. You could have that go bad in so many ways. You know, the kid who's supposed to open the actual, you know, valve, that valve could get stuck, or the pressure could get, burst the pipe in the wrong place, or like, there's all sorts of things that could happen that could be fun and like, oh shit. And they just never do with that one. He just locks himself in there, lets the dude get killed, and then opens the window when he knows he might get killed. It's just okay.
There you go.
Bummer.
That's what disappoints us and holds back movies for us. Time and time again, it's the thing, and it's how I like to put it. The film did not pursue its potent possibilities.
That's right. What'd you think of the weird CGI fingerless hands at the end?
I didn't really notice or care.
God, it stuck out so much to me that you spent most of this movie without any real CGI, and then you have this touching moment where the older sister has clawed so hard to remove the chains.
The movie's filled with CGI every time they're getting burned.
That I'm willing to give a pass on the flame stuff, but like beyond that, it's not really there much. This was overt. It's in a close-up on her face, and you're showing these stubby hands that are just so poorly comped in with like the wrong lighting. I was like, dude, just go get 2 fucking prosthetic fake hands, cut the fingers off, and hold them in frame. Let them just be there. Like, why bother with this comp? It made no sense to me, and I was just like, this whole sequence bummed me out. I was like, it could have been so great. It could have been the bus scene times 10, and it wasn't. And I was like, ugh.
I think it could have been the bus scene times 10 with a lot more than just having a non-CG hand.
It's true. It's true. But the non-CG hand at least, I don't know. The CG hand made me just kind of go, ugh, I'm out. Fine. Like, I was already bummed out. Now I'm really just like, ugh, bleh. It's a stream.
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe, and, to bring it back to that Howard Hawks quote, probably would have had to be a rent it to if it had more than one great scene.
Totally.
But it's why it can be tricky to figure out is because there were no bad scenes. Yeah.
That's right. There really aren't. That's interesting. There's a lot of good.
And a lot of times when something, that difference, just to tie it all together, the difference between a good scene and a great scene, or a not bad scene and a great scene, is whether or not those possibilities are pursued.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotta say, from just a personal, I guess it's a taste point of view. Is it a taste? Sure. I really, it was, I didn't want to watch the movie once I was like, oh, they're just going to tie her up and torture her. It was hard for me to stay focused and connected to it. I was like, I just don't want it. I don't, there's nothing about this that's appealing, even if they know what the lesson is. I just was like, I don't want it. Like,
I would have been there, but I thought they did a good job of throughout you're cutting back to the other sister who, as soon as, she sees the teacher getting set on fire on the news, starts her vendetta against people in against people students in uniforms. So it's like you had this monster on the pursuit thing throughout that was building it. But without that, I would be with you in that complaint.
I think it's just, it's a personal sensibility in the moment. I was just like, I don't want to swallow this right now. Like, I just don't. I'm going to, but I don't want to. I just, ugh. The other thing that stuck out to me, I kind of mentioned this at the top, the over-the-topness of the character actions, like in particular the bully, like the way they depict these moments, it became at times hard for me to buy in. I was like, I get it, it's stylized, it's supposed to be over the top, but like when he beats up the other student for kicking out the chair of Lynn,
that was so violent. The teacher takes forever to react. Yeah.
Over the top. I was like, it pushed beyond my willing suspension of disbelief. It just did. It was too violent and over the top. And you can make him have an extreme over the top reaction. You can't put a fucking piece of wood in his hand that probably has a screw in it and have him repeatedly beat a kid to death. I mean, that kid would be fucking dead. And I just was like, it's too much. We've crossed the line. That was the line right there. Leading up to that, a lot of that stuff, the sort of fart jokes and the students, everybody chanting or throwing papers. I was like, yeah, it's over the top, but I get it. They're kind of they're heightening the stylized sort of aspect of that reality. But man, once he started beating that kid up, I was like, we've crossed over. And it took me out. I was like, that conversation afterwards, the teacher being mad at him, I was like, he should be in jail. What are we doing here? This isn't a reprimand moment. This is you just committed a major crime. You assaulted somebody almost to death. What are we doing? Slap on the wrist? Come on.
I agree entirely. That moment, yeah, weird, too much.
Yeah.
Great.
That's it.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, great. So then to wrap up Mon 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 Monsters, we'll move on to our last section here for it. Things of note.
Things of note!
This should be interesting.
Thought it was interesting that the filmmaker Giddens Co. is a author of books. So this was his second film, and both of the films were adaptations of his own work.
Nice.
So I thought that was interesting. The other thing I had here was straight from the Wikipedia up front in the description. This little bit on it. It goes, Ko originally intended for the film to be a mockumentary shot entirely on iPhone. This idea, however, was eventually disregarded as the project evolved into a more personal work, inspired in part by the backlash the director was receiving at the time for a widely publicized affair. While discussing his inspiration, Ko has stated, "Maybe millions of Taiwanese people hated me, so I wanted to shoot a horror movie to scare everybody, to express my hate."
Whoa.
I'm just kind of like, okay.
That's super intense.
Yeah.
Jesus. I don't even know what to think of that.
I know, same here, but interesting for sure. Noteworthy for sure.
Yeah. Huh. All right.
Great.
I mean, it's always good when you're going into making something to have a motivating factor.
Even if it's just a nihilistic feeling, there's something.
Right. Yeah. Cool. I think we should shout out the cinematographer, who was Patrick Chow. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. And note that it did really well. It more than doubled its budget in, I'm sorry, the other way around. It didn't do very well. It only made less than half of its budget back, which is a bummer. But there's still time, guys. There's still time.
So many movies, it's not about that initial making money back. It's got the long life on digital shelves everywhere.
Yep.
And this one is available to Shudder subscribers. And I think on Amazon Prime, too.
Probably,
or no, maybe that was just showing up because Shudder is part of that. Anyway, find it on Shudder. And hopefully or whatever, probably do okay for itself.
An interesting little subnote in the Wikipedia. There's a section for cameo appearances, which I don't know. I think that's an interesting, weird thing. Like, you don't see very often, but maybe it's a thing, non-Western filmmaking thing.
I imagine more it's just like they were actors from his other movies or people who are behind the scenes. Just fun little
because all of them
inserts.
But one are just students on the bus. They threw a bunch of people, I guess, that are for some reason cameo worthy.
Yeah. That's my assumption.
I just think that's cool and interesting and weird. I don't really know. I've never seen that before. Cameo appearance. Cool.
Great. All right. Is that it
dude.
for Mon 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 Monsters then?
I think it is.
All right. We like to wind down here before we pull next week's film with our RecommenDEADtions for the week.
I was reminded recently of a film that I had completely forgotten that I had watched. It was like, I think and it was so good. It's like weird that it didn't stay in my brain. And then I saw a list of like some of the good things. I was like, what's good on Netflix right now, or what's good on Hulu or whatever. And this was on there. I was like, wait, what is that movie? I think I've seen it. And I looked it up and I was like, oh shit, I had totally forgotten about this movie. And it was really good. It's actually amazing. It's called Super Dark Times. It is on Netflix. I'm almost certain it's Netflix. It is so messed up and so good and so moody. And I think the reason I didn't remember it is because there's not necessarily a like overt story. It's kind of just this like weird snapshot of adolescent. Is it adolescence? Are teenagers adolescents? Yes. Of these teenagers existing and like some really dark things happen around them. That's probably why it's called Super Dark Times. But man, it's a mood piece. You got to watch it. It's so freaky and just upsetting in a good way, I guess.
Around what? When are we talking about? Did it come out?
17. It's only a couple years old, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That always helps me picture something.
It's got some really good young actors in it that I've seen in other things too. So yeah, no, it's good. Watch it.
Cool. I haven't heard of it. Say the name one more time.
Super Dark Times.
Funny. Cool. Well, I traveled back further for my recommendation. I watched for the first time, Tim, from 1980, Flash Gordon. It was...
Yes.
Yes, it was everything I was hoping for and more. I loved it so much. It was like I had watched Barbarella earlier in pandemic times and loved it. And it was on that exact Beastmaster was something you recommended before, is scratching whatever that all is. Like, and it was just with the blasting Queen theme song, and like all the actors were so good and so much fun, and the production design, it didn't matter. Like, it was part of the charm how hokey some of the costumes were. Yeah. Like, and I just, it was so much fun. And then it was just really well done, and with some touches of the writing and how like the finale played out, and just great pacing. I could go on. I loved it so much. It is one of the greats. What a movie. Get it. It just had a 4K re-release, and it was just nice. So incredible to watch it that way, where it was like you had some model shots of the spaceships where it like going through the colored clouds, and it's just looked so cool. God, I love the look overall, where you had these like weird colored skylines, and just everything's so trippy. I loved it so much. One of my favorites, so I'm with you. Cool. Well, I've caught up. There you go. This is my recommendation. All right, I believe it's your turn to pull from the hat. Okay, well, I've got it right here. So here we go. This one, which is, come on now, Santa Sangre, 1989. It's Jodorowsky. Jodorowsky? Is that how you say his name? Yeah, Alejandro. Cool. Santa Sangre. I'm very excited. I've never seen any of his movies, so well then I just know about this one. Well, you should in life. So yeah, I hope this was a good introduction. I haven't seen this one. El Topo is the main one that I know. Yeah. But yes, this is classified as, the rest of his movies, avant-garde, surreal, but indeed is one of his films that has the horror genre in its description. So this should we're be doing it. I'm very excited too. We got to figure out where to find it. We'll find it wherever we do. Hell yeah, brother. Until then, you can find us wherever you found us. We got Instagram, we got Twitter, all that jazz. It's true. Our big ask is you tell a friend if you enjoyed being here and you think they might enjoy being here as well. Also true. Great. Well, then, in closing, thanks so much for listening. And we will see you next time. Goodbye.